Hello and welcome, it's Angela here. I just want to say, before I start to tell my story, how grateful I am and how inspired I've been by those who've shared their stories of what are known as near-death experiences. There's a lot of talk about this at the moment, which I think is fantastic. I don't know why it's happening now, but there seems to be an explosion in terms of people coming forward with their experiences and sharing what's happened to them, which is wonderful. And my experience happened decades ago, and I just felt unable to speak about it. So this is the first time that I'm talking about this publicly, and yes, a lot of credit goes to those that I've seen or heard speak about their experience, because it's given me the courage to share my story, but also at the same time help me to recognize how helpful it is to hear someone else's story. So if I share mine, it may help you, for instance, and that's my motivation for doing it. It's purely to help others. And in listening to others talk about their interpretation of what's happened to them, it's helped me actually to understand my experience more clearly, though I don't fully understand exactly what was going on, and you will be able to perhaps put your own interpretation on what follows. And I've called it a near-death experience, but that's not necessarily what it was. It seems to have some of the components that are commonly experienced when people have died or are considered clinically dead. Although I didn't actually die, yes, some of the experiences I had were similar to those of an NDE, but I did have an out-of-body experience and experienced the light, which I'll come to. So yes, thank you for being here, and here's my story. I had recently become pregnant, and both myself and my then husband were delighted at the prospect of being parents. It was 1990 and I was 28 years old, fit and healthy. I'd been feeling fine physically, however, out of the blue one day I suddenly felt very, very tired. Even though it was in the middle of the day, I decided to go and have a lie down. I wouldn't dream of having a lie down during the day, usually, being quite active and really quite self-critical as well. So, if I'd had a lie down during the day, I would think of that as being lazy. Anyway, I thought to myself I'd just rest for a few minutes until I felt I had enough energy to get on with the housework. And I was alone in the house, which wasn't unusual, but I remember thinking it seemed particularly quiet. I went upstairs and lay on top of the bed, fully clothed. I just intended to relax for a few minutes, so I didn't remove my contact lenses. The next thing I remember, I was levitating beyond the end of the bed, approximately 3 feet off the floor. I was horizontal and being spun really quickly, a bit like being on a spit, but rotating very, very fast. I say being spun rather than I was spinning, because I felt I had no control over what was happening. I remember asking, I'm not sure if I said it out loud, for the spinning to stop, because my eyes were hurting and I wanted to take my contact lenses out. At the time I was wearing hard lenses, the kind that cause a lot of discomfort if you close your eyes for any length of time. Also, I was scared. I'm not sure how much time passed, but I became aware of being in the bed, under the covers, with someone next to me. I remember feeling very calm and relaxed as I turned to look at this person. What I saw was a man, or what appeared to be a man, with long white hair, sitting up in the bed wearing a white gown. 3 things struck me about this person. The first was the feeling of pure, unconditional love that was radiating out from him. The second was that his arms, which were resting on top of the bedding, were shortened and bent inwards. Thirdly, whilst he had long white hair and exuded age, lifetimes in fact, and wisdom, He appeared to have no wrinkles and seemed youthful. As I was looking at this person, I became aware of a baby crawling around on top of the bedding, on top of me. It may be that I was not allowed to see this child, or perhaps I just couldn't take my eyes off the man, but I didn't actually see the baby. I just knew it was there, and I could feel joy and playfulness and love coming towards me from the child, and I felt a really strong bond with and a deep love for the child. The next moment the baby was gone, and I was on top of the bedding, kneeling up, and I was wrapped in a warm embrace by this man whose arms were now restored. Or I thought it was the same person, it may not have been. We were bathed in the most brilliant white light that I find difficult to describe. It was brighter than any light I'd ever seen before, but not painful to the eyes, and it seemed that I could feel the light as well as see it. The feeling of pure, unconditional love that I experienced was just beautiful and beyond words. It was as if the light was love, and love was the light. I also had this feeling of being opened and expanded, so that I understood everything in that instant. It's hard to describe, it's very difficult to put in words, because obviously I'm speaking through the filter of my brain and this human body. But in that moment, I was out of my body and I was free, and I just was immersed in this incredible unconditional love and all-knowing, which was beautiful. Next, I was alone in the light, and the beautiful feelings continued. It seemed as if I was being given time to take it in, and I somehow just knew in those moments that this love light belongs to all of us, that is where we belong somehow, and where we come from and where we return to. I don't know how long I've been out or unconscious or whatever you want to call it for, but it was still daylight when I sat up to remove my contact lenses, and I was on top of the undisturbed bedding just as I had been when I first lay down. Something else I haven't mentioned is when I was aware of the child on top of me, and that wonderful loving energy and bond that I felt with it, even though I couldn't see it because I was looking at the person next to me, or the spirit, whatever it was. I was aware of some figures to my right, just out of my eye line, that were having a conversation. It seemed that they were discussing what was going to happen next. And they seemed to be focused on the child. But for whatever reason, I wasn't able to, or I wasn't allowed to see them and know what it was that they were talking about. But generally, I just had this overwhelming feeling of peace and unconditional love, and a sense of knowing that all was well. In the following days, I had a lot of pain and blood loss, and I was told by my doctor that I'd had a miscarriage and to just rest. The bleeding slowed, but I knew all was not well, and over the following weeks I grew weaker. I was given scans, but nothing was detected. Eventually, I had to have emergency surgery for an ectopic pregnancy. That's where the fetus grows in the fallopian tube, and was told that I'd been bleeding internally and could have died. I kept thinking about the dream, or whatever you want to call it, the experience, and I felt reassured that whatever the outcome, all would be well. I wondered what it all meant. Had I been given a message about the life that had started to grow inside me? Could the white-haired man be the spirit of my lost child? Was the baby I could see, was the baby that I could sense but not see, a representation of my lost child? Or a sign that I would be a mother one day? Sadly, I haven't been able to have children. And if you're into astrology, you'll know that I'm a Cancerian. So if you are into astrology, you'll know that Cancerians are often referred to as the mothers of the zodiac, and we're known for being nurturing and empathic and very mothering. So being a Cancerian and not being able to have children, yes, it's been difficult, and I've felt that loss. But what sustained me through the years is this experience, because I've been able to return to that and feel that sense of unconditional love, but also that sense of all is well and all is as it should be. And at the time, I imagine that people around me might have felt that I was lacking in emotion or a bit cold because I didn't break down, and I didn't show a lot of emotion over the loss of this child. But it's because I just felt that I felt comforted by the experience. So what I do know about the experience is that regardless of whether I dreamed it or it was an hallucination caused by a temporary lack of oxygen or a chemical imbalance in my brain, a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience or a visitation from an angel or spirit, it was wonderful, and I feel truly blessed that it happened at all. There are lots of things I seem to forget quite easily, like movies I've seen, books I've read, names of people, statistics, and even places I've visited. However, there are a few experiences I remember vividly, and this is one of them. It turned out to be very profound and life-changing for me. But I haven't been able to speak about it because I didn't want to tarnish it by talking about it and possibly have people laugh or think I was crazy. Also, I didn't want to give the impression that I believed I'd been singled out in some way because I thought I was special or better than others. Sharing it now in such a public way is testament to how far I've come in terms of my self-worth and ability to trust. And also, as I mentioned, it's a lot of credit is due to those people who've already shared their stories, because it's given me the courage to speak out as well. So I shall be eternally grateful for what happened that day, because it enabled me to connect to the unconditional love that exists within us all. I'd had brief glimpses of it previously, but those glimpses were distorted by layers of scar tissue from too many hurts and disappointments. I'd been through some dark times as I was growing up, as many of us have, and I knew when I recovered from the surgery that my life had to change. You see, I was good at pretending to the outside world that I gave the impression that I was confident and happy, when in reality I felt empty and worthless and very much unloved. I found it easy to give love, but difficult to accept it, because I didn't feel worthy. Externally, my life appeared to be just about perfect, but internally, I felt lonely and depressed, and had felt that way for a long time. After my wonderful experience that day, I knew I couldn't go on believing that I was worthless and undeserving of love. I also knew that I wanted to help others who, like me, appeared normal, but were in such pain behind the mask. Although I haven't always been conscious of the love within since then, sometimes very much removed from it, on reflection, I'm sure it has sustained me through years of dealing with my demons, or as a psychologist might say, facing my shadow and living with failed attempts at conception, as I mentioned. Decades later, despite the heartache of not being able to have children, I do acknowledge the gift of time that being childless has given me. It's allowed me to have the space to study and research and ultimately find help and inspiration, culminating in an acceptance of myself and an awareness of my value, enabling me to help others, not just in my work, but in life generally, by being more present and more compassionate. So the experience woke me up, really, and set me off on a path of a search for meaning. And, I consumed books, a huge number of books, and attended many courses, studied psychotherapy. I underwent psychotherapy. I became an EFT practitioner, emotional freedom techniques, and had the privilege of witnessing not just the suffering and challenges of people I worked with, but the wonder of witnessing their healing and growth, and yes, very humbling experience. And now I hope to be able to share the message of love and light through my readings at Heart Wisdom. I want to say more about my story because having had such an amazing experience, like many, it can be difficult to remain in that state of grace in this existence, because we're human beings and we have to go through this life. And yes, I had a further experience that enabled me to reconnect, which I will speak about in a future video, so please do join me for that. Thank you so much for listening, and particularly for staying to the end. I send you much love, and until next time, be kind and loving to yourself.